Our next speaker is Alexandru Floristean. Alexandru is an expert in legal and policy research for the purpose of collecting and assembling evidence on the impacts of EU policies. As such, he is now leading Hydrogen Europe's Regulatory Intelligence Department. More recently, Alexandru has coordinated and provided key policy analysis for the High Law project, which has researched and published information on key legal and administrative processes relevant to the deployment of hydrogen technology in Europe. Currently, he's conducting a worldwide analysis of policies which may impact negatively and positively the deployment of hydrogen technologies in the context of fuel cells and hydrogen observability. More broadly, Mr. Floristean has more than 9 years of experience undertaking projects on behalf of European institutions and decentralized organizations. Alexandru is going to talk about the hydrogen's role in EU plans for energy transition. Alexandru, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, and I hope everybody can hear me very well. So, of course, thank you very much for the invitation. Despite Brexit, the UK is not going anywhere. It's not like you can raise your anchor and sail away. So I think it's very kind of you to invite me and speak about the European perspective. What is going on in hydrogen just across the channel? What are the different countries doing? What are the policies that are going to be enacted? And what are the macroeconomic changes that we can expect in the sector? Just a few words before we begin about myself and my organization. So I represent Hydrogen Europe, as you can see from the banner behind me. We exist. Our purpose is to help decarbonize our economies using clean hydrogen technologies. That is our reason to exist. We are there to help all the sectors where such technologies can be useful decarbonization tools. And you've heard earlier which industries those are. So this is the mission we pursue, and everything we do as a non-profit organizations reflects this. We have formed, together with the European Commission, a partnership called the Fuel Cells and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking, and through it we support the research and innovation in the sector. Now, aside from of course, the negative effect brought on by the COVID pandemic, the past 2 years have been absolutely amazing for the hydrogen industry, and the amount of growth and take up and interest in the industry has been overwhelming. Just the membership growth of Hydrogen Europe is an indication of the growth of industry in this sector, and I think in the past 2 years we've grown by around 80 members to now have more than 200 members from the entire clean hydrogen value chain. So everything starting from production of clean hydrogen, its transport and its distribution, and representatives from all the end uses, from industry, transport, re-electrification, storage, steel, buildings, and so on. So these are members who have committed to implement our mission, that is of using clean hydrogen technologies in the service of decarbonizations. We're actually very proud that our membership is so broad and so diverse that it allows us to look at hydrogen from a system perspective. What is the best from the system, rather than focus on one simple and one small part of the value chain. In practice, what is going on? I apologize for the slides. I think they may have damage in terms of formatting, but I think you can get the idea of what's going on. What we want to replace. We want to replace all unabated fossil hydrogen consumption, and start replacing fossil fuels in the other sectors where hydrogen can play a role. This is the replacement of natural gas in heating, the replacement of diesel and petrol in road transportation, the replacement of heavy fuel oil and other fuels in the maritime sector, the replacement of kerosene in aviation, the replacement of coal in the steel sector. You get the idea. We are painfully aware that the clean hydrogen sector, starts from a very low penetration point, and this is what's illustrated here on this graph. But this is what makes us even more motivated in our ambitions, based on our current, and I would say realistic estimates. By 2024, the ratio of clean hydrogen production should be, well, the ratio in absolute terms, the production should be 13 times that of today, and by 2030, 100 times larger. So, where are we at EU level? Well, in short, the EU agrees. When it was launched in December, many people perceived the EU Green Deal as only being a roadmap for sustainable and eventual carbon neutrality. However, it is much more than that. It is the EU's strategic, political, and economic direction. It is called the EU's growth strategy. So concretely, it details planned actions, legislative and non-legislative, for months and years to come to achieve the overarching goal of reshaping the EU's economy and making it carbon neutrality. Well, this brings me to this slide, which basically shows that the top leaders here, the president of the Commission and the Vice President, Mr. Timmermans, supporting hydrogen's role within the European Green Deal. Concretely, what does it mean? If we look at this, we need to say that the European Commission issued on the same day 3 strategies. An energy system integration strategy, which views the energy system as a whole, as one single entity that needs to function together and needs to achieve system efficiency. An EU hydrogen strategy, which should be seen as the glue that holds a single energy system together and allows optimization between all the other energy carriers, as you were shown earlier, and a clean hydrogen alliance that should deal with the implementation of these strategies and make sure that these strategies are implemented in practice. If you were to summarize these strategies in one single sentence, it would be that the EU Commission wants to have 2 times 40 gigawatts of electrolysis capacity installed in the EU and in our immediate neighborhood by 2030. Let's say that would be the target to achieve this. I would like to put things into perspective. 2 times 40 gigawatts means 82 million tons of CO2 emissions avoided every year. It would mean around 170,000 direct, not indirect, direct employment. And the CO2 emission reduction, it would be equivalent to removing 60 million cars from EU road, removing them all together as if they were not existing. So it is huge. To be fair, actually, this figure is both huge and insufficient at the same time. And allow me to explain. 80 gigawatts of electrolysis is more than 480, I think 480 times more than what is installed today worldwide, around the world. And yet it would only provide enough fuel to satisfy 16% of global shipping needs. So that puts things into perspective. However, if we would do that, it would be enough to satisfy twice the need for hydrogen of all European refineries, which is currently the current main user of gray unabated hydrogen, in case we'll still use fossil fuels in 2030, which, in my opinion, if we only invest in battery electric vehicles, we will definitely be seeing fossil fuels continue to drive in 2030 and well into the decade. Now, I would go a little bit deeper and say a few words about where industry is in this strategy. Basically, the industry that I represent. We are ready to deliver on the very high expectations of policymakers. We are monitoring the concrete plans of industries to deliver projects, to build concrete projects in the production and end use of clean hydrogen. Again, I'm very sorry for the graph, but what you can see now is there are concrete plans to build and install more than 20 gigawatts of production capacity by 2040. Now, very few of those have reached final investment decision. So I don't want to give you a wrong picture and say everything's fine. There is a lot of work ahead of us to make these projects a reality and to expand on them to actually reach and exceed the targets. Even if all would reach final investment decisions, it would fall short of the goal of 40 gigawatts. But of course, these are still early days. Remember, the strategies have only came out in July of this year, and the legislative framework is far from being supportive of our industry, and I will explain why in a few moments. We saw from the poll at the start of today's webinar that you see the legal framework as one of the main barriers, and that is very much correct. Here's something that might be interesting for today's audience. Where exactly is industry planning on deploying these huge production capacities? Well, we track this as well, and if we look at the industry plans, we can clearly see that the Netherlands has a clear lead in becoming a clean hydrogen production powerhouse. Fighting for second place are Spain, Germany, Denmark, France, and Portugal, very close to each other. And surprisingly, despite its immense potential, especially in offshore wind, the UK can be said to be in the third tier when it comes to plans for production of clean hydrogen. Now, I want to qualify that. Again, I apologize for the graph. Maybe our database is not comprehensive enough yet, or maybe players are still waiting for the UK hydrogen strategy to be released next year before unveiling their projects and designing them. So there's still time to catch up. Talking about national hydrogen strategies, I wanted to give you a comparison about where the other countries are at the moment. So 6 countries have officially adopted the hydrogen strategies. These include the Netherlands, Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, and Norway. So Netherlands should be turquoise or whatever that color is on that graph. The UK is also should be in yellow, because I know they are planning to develop a strategy alongside another six countries in Europe. To be fair, having a strategy in place is not a replacement for policies. A strategy does not have legal force. Therefore, we also look at what the strategies are already and what policies are already in place. And that's what you see on the right side of the graph, that some countries have already established some policies, and these are countries that may not even have an overarching strategy in place. I'd like to specifically mention the UK, which already has policies in place, but also Italy, Finland, and Austria, which are quite leading in that respect. Now, still speaking about the national hydrogen strategies, if you count all the commitments of the different countries together, you would reach around half the planned EU target of 40 gigawatts. So we have the strategies and the plans in place. What is needed then is implementation. Implementation is absolutely key. The first key of implementation is money. Again, you've correctly identified cost as the most important barrier for the development of hydrogen in Northern Ireland. And again, you are right. From the national hydrogen strategies that have been published so far, we can see that significant funds are being earmarked for the implementation of these strategies. This is a good sign. Just a note on the Spanish one, that figure includes private leverage and not just public funding, but I believe the other ones include public funding. This is obviously not going to be enough. We estimate that in order to deploy 40 gigawatts of electrolysis together with the investment necessary for its consumption, so the replacement part of the fossil fuels, around 430 billion euros would be needed in terms of direct investments. This, of course, includes both public and private, so including the private leverage. However, of course, this is just a starting point. The industry needs to be kicked off and then allowed to fly and to run on its own feet. So it is definitely a good start. Unfortunately, I do want to say the negative part of this coin is that despite the existence of plans and strategies, the concrete and effective policies with let's say legal force supporting the production of hydrogen are simply not in place. Very few countries have policies that even aim to do that, and even those that have them, I have to say that they're not very effective. I think this shows, and it's fair to say that there is a lot of work ahead of the national regulators, the policymakers, to implement their strategies in practice and to implement the legal framework in practice. I would even point out that it's even worse than this. The policies that are in place, and I'll get to it in a second, because I'm referring to the principle of additionality enshrined in the Renewable Energy Directive, basically amount to a showstopper and are blocking investment and should be removed or adapted before these strategies can become a reality. Which brings me naturally back to where I started, which is the EU level. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I do want to explain a little bit about what are the most relevant policies at EU level, so you understand how what macro let's say macro legislative forces are in play and how they might shape the sector going into the next decade. So of course we're talking about the Energy Union and the Clean Energy Package, which planted the seeds for a potential market for clean hydrogen. It is only until the Green Deal was launched that these seeds began to grow. Now, what really will allow the tree to blossom, let's say, if I can use that analogy, is the EU's recovery plan, the 700 billion euro recovery plan that, if properly handled and if focused on sustainable investments in clean energy solutions, not if it goes to subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, as some players would like it to do. Only if it's focused on sustainable investments, it can accelerate the growth of clean hydrogen as well and allow it to reach its potential as a key decarbonization solution. I want to be specific and say which legal acts I'm talking about, and unfortunately, you can't see the slide very well. Again, I'm sorry for that, but I'm going to mention it. I am talking about the Renewable Energy Directive. I am talking about the governance regulation, and of course, I'm talking about, as I said earlier, the new multi-annual financial framework and the EU recovery plan. So to finish my presentation, because I think I've dragged a little bit too long, I want to tell you a few words about what's coming next, and I want to focus on the future. In Europe, in order to adequately implement the Green Deal, carbon neutrality first has to be signed into law. That will be the first and probably the most important game changer. Once carbon neutrality is enshrined into law, there is no escaping clean hydrogen. Carbon neutrality is simply not possible without clean hydrogen. Basically, that means clean hydrogen becomes an inescapable solution and an inescapable piece of the puzzle. Going beyond that, what is probably more important on the short term is the increase of ambition with respect to CO2 reduction by 2030. Apparently, there's a compromise set to increase the target to 55% reduction, or hopefully even to 60%. If that happens, almost all major EU legislative acts on environment and climate and energy need to be revised. Almost all of them. These include the Renewable Energy Directive, the Emissions Trading Scheme, the Excise Tax Directive, which needs to be brought in line with climate objectives and needs to tax CO2 content rather than energy value. The CO2 emission performance standards, everything. The ambition of those instruments will be significantly increased to match the reality. And if you think we're having a momentum now for hydrogen in 2020, after the revision of these acts to be brought in line with 55% or 60% target, I think that will significantly accelerate, and we will really see the industry taking off. I'd like to stop now. Again, I apologize for my slides. I'll try to correct them before we send them out. But I'm happy to take questions.
Alexandru, we'll park the questions. We're just slightly running over time, and we'll park them to the Q&A at the end if the audience don't mind. We want to try and keep on time to keep the engagement, because I know people come into the webinar just for specific slots, and we try to keep that if we can. As Alexandru said, he would correct the slides. All the slides will be made public at the end of the webinar on the GenCom website, and the recordings, when we have them edited, will be sent out next week also on the GenCom website. Alexandru, many thanks for your presentation.